Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another amazing episode of the best darn show on the internet, the Over Sharon Show. We have an awesome returning guest for you guys today. But before we get into that, we're going to do our normal thing. And today, Sharon is actually going to read a quote and I'm going to pull a card. So what's up, Sharon?
Hi, I have a different background, as you can see. I'm in Jersey today.
I love it.
Yeah.
No, it's great. It's a synchronicity because you're at your man's house and I'm at my woman's house right
Oh,
now.
that's funny.
Yeah. So, and it's
So,
and anyway, go ahead.
yeah, the quote, yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. The quote is, "The fool who persists in his folly will become wise." And that is by William Blake. And it actually reminds me of a video I was watching earlier yesterday or today, by Aaron Abkey. And it's a short video. I think it's like 13, 14 minutes or something like that. But the quote that stood out to me that he says, and I think I'm paraphrasing, but he said, "Religion is training wheels for spirituality," which I really, really love that, because I think we're going to get into some of this today. But a lot of people need to participate in those, religious practices, church or whatever they need to go through to become more aware of really what's going on and the true spirituality of everything around us. So I found that very relevant and very related to what we're going to talk about today. It's very
Yeah, and
coincidental.
that's kind of why I chose that quote, because we want to make it known before we even start talking about a lot of the stuff that we're not judging people. I mean, some particular people in history, we might be like giving them the screwdriver in the back, maybe deserve it. But we understand that they could all be fools in a sense. And I even view myself as a fool sometimes. So again, this isn't another judgment, but they're just going along trying to figure it out, man. They're just doing their best, right? And sometimes their best is just whatever it is, the Catholic Church or whatever. And sometimes there could still be really good people in there. So we're just trying to outline the lies that we found and some of the truth that we found. So that's basically what we're doing. And I pulled a card today from the Golden Dawn deck, which is, as you'll see, it's going to be very synchronistic to what we talk about today. So, let me see if I can, there we go, make myself bigger. So it's the King of Wands, which I'm really excited that we pulled this card, because a lot of cards in this deck, the minor arcana are pretty bland. So I was hoping to pull something flashy, and this one is super flashy. And the King of Wands, if you think about what wands represent with fire and
Action.
yeah, and then you can even think about like our guest today with alchemy, you use fire a lot in that, and it has a lot to do with creation and magic, like Sharon said. And in this card, you see this guy leaping over the fire, and he's got his little staff in his hand. So I like it. It's an action card, which usually kings, you see them seated on thrones. So I think it's cool because they're kind of highlighting that there's action going on with this, even though it's a stable card. And
I,
I feel like that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be putting the fire to some of these ideas that people have had and maybe have clung to. So yeah.
I wanted to just quickly say that that Golden Dawn is similar to the Crowley deck, right? Is a similarity or kind
Yeah, I
of
believe they were all like around at the same time, all these
okay.
people. So yeah.
The reason I say that is because in the Thoth deck, there is no king. There is a prince and a knight. And it's interesting because the prince and the knight it's almost like they're swapped from the Rider Waite, because the prince is actually what is the king in the Rider Waite. Or no, is it the knight? I get mixed up. I forget. But one of them is and then he's riding a horse too, which in this guy he's riding a horse, and usually only the knights ride the horse, right? But I think in the Thoth deck, the prince rides the horses. And maybe you can find a card, because I don't have any of my decks with me except for I just have my little deck with me.
Yeah, we could find it as we go along. I like that you made that distinction, because I'm sure there is some esoteric idea behind why they did it, and we could probably get into that. But before we go a little too long with this introduction, I want to introduce our lovely guest who the last 2 Saturday nights, I've had the honor to spend my time with this wonderful gentleman on Zoom 2 Saturdays ago, or well, a week and a couple. By this time, it'll be almost 2 weeks. We did a episode about Dune with Joshua the Branch, and that was really amazing. We broke it down, mostly the book. We did touch on the movie, although I hadn't seen the movie, but I have since seen the movie. So if that comes up, we can always talk about that. And I really enjoy the movie. And I do have some critiques, of course, but we'll talk about that if you want. And then this past Saturday, I got an invite. It's funny because I wanted to do a live stream and I just couldn't put anything together. And then I got this message from Ben on Telegram, and he's like, "Hey, you want to come weave?" And I'm like, "Fuck yeah, I want to come weave." So we went for over like 4 hours. So if you guys want to check that out, definitely check it out. I know it's a long
only 4 minutes and after 4 hours.
Yeah, that's all. So what else are you gonna do? Watch the TV or whatever? Watch that. It was a lot of fun. We had some comedy. I did some jokes. I showed my foot on screen at one point because I was trying to explain a joke. I told some stories about the Marine Corps, but enough about me. Check all this stuff out if you like it. But anyway, here's our fabulous guest, Mr. Ben
Balderson. You are muted, just so you know. There you go.
How you doing, Ben?
Yeah, I got it during the intro. I got to keep the animal noises out, if I'm not talking. So
Zoom's pretty good about muting those things. So
nice. And happy 710 to everybody. And absolutely been having a good time with Brandon for a couple weeks now. The Dune show was absolutely fire. He was a fantastic guest on the Weave. Sharon's also been a guest on Weaving Spiders. That's how we had originally met. And your intro brought up so many things. One that I can do quickly is the tarot. So Rider Waite, I don't like that deck. They did the original inversion, and actually Crowley, and a lot of people don't realize this, but Crowley tried to set the deck more back in order. And so if you look,
that why the 8 and 11 are swapped?
Which cards is it? 8 and 11.
Yeah.
Yep, the 8 and 11.
Yeah.
So there's that inversion that Yep. That's excellent. Most people have no idea about that one. And it really, with the 8 and 11, it makes it more from a 3-part deck to a 2-part deck, where it's really it's originally set up, and it changes it more into just a straight duality with the Rider Waite. And then actually originally there wasn't in a lot of the decks, when you start getting back to the actual old decks, a lot of them didn't even have queens in them. They had princes and knights. So the whole thing, like some of the upper royalty wasn't really in there like that. And then a lot of times there was a lot of them didn't have any feminine figure in it in any way. So a lot of times the prince took the place of the queen, and then so any card that you would see with a prince in that, it should have been a queen. I did a whole Crow episode on the tarot because they wanted me to look at the Marseille deck.
Yeah, I remember that.
Then
I need to go listen to that again.
Yeah, they wanted me to look at the Marseille deck and the decks that were before the tarot decks that they're dealing with now. And honestly, the whole thing it's absolutely fascinating, because then you got to throw in the minor arcana. In my opinion, the whole thing it's not fortune telling like what it gets used as today. You've got the 52 cards, which is your 52 weeks of your minor arcana. Then you've got your 4 suits, which are your 4 seasons. And then in your major arcana, it covers each of it breaks down and it covers each of the constellations. And then there's some of the cards that are just background cards, basically. So depending on where the time is sitting, that card comes and takes focus, and it sets like I don't know if anybody's played like Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic or any of those games where you have like the background and now like all water creatures are stronger and things like that. It almost works like that. And so the whole thing becomes like if you laid it on top, it'd become like almost like a timepiece that you can rotate around, and you got your weeks and your months and your seasons, the whole nine.
That's amazing. I would like to see that. Does anybody have a picture of that or like a depiction of that somewhere?
LC King, I think, has one. I'm
Check
pretty
out
sure.
his
And
channel.
he's actually working on an app that has like a greater and a better understanding of the great cycle. Because I don't think it's a solar or a lunar calendar. I think that's all wrong.
Yeah,
Like,
I concur.
so the thing that always stays the exact same is the constellations.
Yeah.
And so that would be your primary timepiece. And then the way he's looking at it, the way he's got his app set up, eventually the sun and the moon and everything come back to the same spot, because they're slightly off from each other.
Yeah.
And then eventually that slightly off catches up,
Yes.
and that ends up becoming a cycle. So he's
Right.
working on a whole app with that. Super fascinating.
That's amazing. I am excited about that app. That I feel like I don't quite understand the zodiac and the stars and the sun and the moon because we don't have a very easy way of seeing it in a picture form, to comprehend it better. But this makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of the old calendars are stellar, and that's why like Zachariah Sitchin, his book, and all his work, he says all the stuff.
1,000-year thing.
Yeah, and then maybe it was just like days or something, That's interesting because it puts us closer to that, which means it could have really been a representation of something that really happened, and it wasn't aliens. It's weird that I have to say that. You know what I mean? It's like, guys, relax. Like I used to believe in aliens.
We're now the conspiracy theorists because things aren't aliens. That's the awesome part.
And I just wanted to show these two cards because Sharon nailed it. Look at that, Sharon. You are on point today. I'm just gonna.
Holy smokes! That's the Thoth deck, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can make it bigger. I have to. Yeah, I don't mind Zoom so much, actually. Sometimes it's a little harder, but the noise control, like Sharon said, I have a fan going right here and you can't even hear it.
No, can't hear it.
Yeah, I've been told that StreamYard's easy to use. Like I use StreamYard, but that Zoom is a better, and is, if you know what you're doing, has more options. You can do more with it.
Yeah. Also, Zoom it's basic that I've noticed. It's pretty just basic, but I could show you how to do it. It's really easy. You just set it to YouTube and then you go. But
so back to those cards you have, huh?
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say
back to the cards.
It's a Zoom commercial right now. It's like, what's going on? No.
Back to the cards. So the Thoth deck was a Knight of Wands, and he's on a horse, right?
Yep.
And he's the king. He represents the king, doesn't he?
Yeah, I believe so.
Did you get your book? Did you finally get your Thoth book?
No, I'm waiting for the new edition. It's going to come out in August. So I should probably get the old edition too.
And so that's the King of Wands and the Knight of Wands. Yeah.
I believe the way, what's his name, Michael Tessarion puts it, because he puts it in a more esoteric view. I think he puts the Knight in that position of the King. Anyway, I can't remember.
Yeah, that's okay.
But yeah,
there's different.
It's amazing how similar they are.
Yeah. In that the book that I have called The Guided Tarot, it's just a simple book. It's based on the Rider-Waite, but the way that it is explained, like when I went to look at the two elements, it was fire and something else. But it's like for that one, would it be fire and fire because he's the king? The two elements associated with that card.
Yeah, I think so.
It might be, but yeah. So, I could tell what the Rider-Waite was referring to it as versus what the Thoth deck was referring to it as.
Nice.
So
you're learning, Sharon. I'm excited.
Yeah. Thanks. Me too.
So it's funny because you said the 8 and 11 thing in the Crowley deck. So maybe I should get more out of you. The way I heard it put was the reason why it was switched was because Crowley and his whole society believed that strength was the most important and the will was the most important. And that's why they put it in that position. But that the Rider Waite folks put it there because they believed that the law was
Justice
was the
more
most important thing.
right?
Yeah, but the way I heard it explained about Crowley was he said the will because it takes the will inside you to actually want to follow that law. And like, so that's the most
strength within. Yeah.
Yeah, the strength within. That's the paramount thing of our existence or whatever. And again, it's not like we worship Crowley or whatever. We just we'll talk about, we take nuggets, things we like.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think, Ben? I like what you said about the duality. That's what caught my attention.
I think that when you look at the two decks, like I said, Crowley went back to the original. So that's I've been studying for a very long time. And this is gonna take a real lot of side touring. I've been
gonna have to overshare.
Obviously, I'm a heathen, and so obviously heathen and pagan things have my interest. And so for a long time, and this is actually going to weave into what Brandon was talking about at the very beginning, even. So this has had my interest for a long time, and I'm not one of those people that puts in surface research on something. I will dig deep and really get as far as I can get with something. And so it doesn't take long being a heathen pagan to start realizing that a lot of what people are practicing and working on today is derived from the neo-pagan movement and has no historical reference whatsoever. I mean, it goes so far as like everybody talks about Ostara, and she's this ancient worship figure and blah, blah. And they can tell you all these stories about Ostara. Ostara was made up by Jacob Grimm. There's no reference to Ostara in any way, shape, or form before the guy who made Grimm's fairy tales. He was a linguist, so the name is linguistically correct based on the idea that he was trying to represent with her. And this was even derivative from Eoster, which Beatty made up completely, another linguist. You start seeing a pattern with that shit. And of course, then Eoster is made up linguistically correct. And to represent the idea that Eoster is, only there's no historical reference to it whatsoever. And so then you start really digging in and you start realizing like even some of the ideas that they're representing were not ideas that were necessarily a thing. So as a heathen, you find out then that they didn't have 4 seasons. There was 2 seasons when you start digging deep enough. There's summer and then winter. And there's basically no celebrations during the summer because that's when you go out and work. That's when you're doing whatever kind of work you're doing. You aren't celebrating. That's working time. And then there's a number of celebrations that happen during the winter. The one that's closest to Easter or Ostara or Eoster is actually masculine. So then you start looking at the inversions that they've implanted in everything. Well, that was Sigurd's bloat. And so it's either Siegfried or Sigurd, depending on which area you're from. And it's the character that after 3 different sections when you look at the heathen myths. There's the golden time beforehand, that's like the creation and where the gods kind of live just doing godly shit, hanging out, having a good time. Then there's like then there's the descent of the gods, the fall of the gods, and that time is distinctly different. In between those, the sun and the moon get eaten and then replaced with a different sun and moon. And then again at Ragnarok, you have this same thing. And then there's a third section where it's more human based, more Midgard. It's not based up in the god section. And Sigurd is the main character that Lord of the Rings is based off of that story, where he's the one who goes and reforges the sword. He fights the dragon. In our story, it's Fafnir, not Smaug. He slays the dragon. That whole trope, all of that's Lord of the Rings is based off of that. So that was the holiday that was actually the one that was closest to spring, that went, you reforged the sword, time to go to work, right? So then there's no holidays in the rest of that. So you start finding a whole lot of things in there that are just completely implanted, and they were all kind of implanted in the same time period. Well, then that brings us to you start fleshing that out, and you start seeing that in that same time period, you get guys like Elias Levi, who brought in Baphomet, and all these people talk about Baphomet like it's some kind of an ancient god, ancient being, except for before Elias Levi, and that picture was drawn by Elias Levi. That's not some ancient thing. Before that, there's only one reference to Baphomet in any way, shape, or form, and that's supposedly when the King of England did not want to pay the Templars for being the road guards that they were being, and ended up accumulating too much money, too much debt, and decided that rather than pay it, he would, slander them and then have them killed as being some horrible beings. And he said that they worship some Baphomet figure. There's no other information behind it. So again, before Elias Levi, there's no historical reference to Baphomet or any kind of a worship or anything like that. That's all nonsense. Then you had the Theosophical Society, and they are a huge problem that so many people, even today, don't realize that their entire thought process and their entire spirituality is deriving from. The Theosophical Society, which most people realize, you got Blavatsky, and that's pretty much, a few other notable characters from the very inception era of it. Now, Blavatsky and them, these were basically the rich kids of that time. So take and put in mind these kids that parents have a lot of money, so they're able to go around and pay for courses in like Brazil and and go to these other places that they consider spiritual, Tibet, and do a weekend spirituality retreat, and then they get their little guru certificate, and now fucking you're able to do Reiki, or you're able to do whatever because you just went and did a $5,000 2-day retreat. And so we've all met these people, and they're jackasses, and they'll go around and take a bunch of them. Well, this was Blavatsky of that time. And if you start looking and studying, like even she's supposedly the big expert on India, on their culture, and the people of India hated her. She was a agent of British expansionism, in their opinion, and she completely misrepresented everything that they said. So then these people, and again, this is please stop. The cats, like if you're paying attention to a screen, they just dance and.
I know all about that. Mine are sleeping right now, thank God.
Oh my gosh.
So when you don't actually live in a culture, you don't actually practice their things, walk that mile in their shoes, it's real easy to not really understand what's being said and to misrepresent it. And so then these people basically did that to a bunch of cultures and then smooshed it all together. And so then they come up with things like the Great White Brotherhood with Sanat Kumara and Jesus or Yeshua or whatever other love and light figure they can contrive, and they're all hanging out in a city above us, really rooting for us. They're just waiting to come down and help, and it's all just bullshit. They made it up. They made it up out of whole cloth. It's all nonsense. So they get this lady, and a lot of that derives out of Gottfried Higgins, with his Anaclypsis, which Anaclypsis is like one of the worst books ever written, I swear. And honestly, it's hilarious because nobody would buy it when it came out. Other occultists just crapped on him because back then you had to actually do the work to be an occultist. And so they all crapped on him. And his books rotted. They sat and rotted and ended up being given away to a bookseller by his son or his grandson. I can't remember which, after he died. Like, here, man, you want this shit? And then eventually with the advent of, and Blavatsky was one of the ones that got a hold of it, and she thought it was great. And this lady is cracked. It's so bad. So then she ends up passing her power on to Alice Bailey, and most people have never heard of this person. And Alice Bailey, yeah. If you put in research, it's bad. She was, the basically the inheritor from Blavatsky. She was the head of the Lucius Trust, and then the Lucius Trust was given giant control in the UN. And so the entire feminism derived out of that. The entire Alice Bailey is the mother of the New Age movement, the entire Love and Light New Age movement. It's all just nonsense. They are straight making things up, and it had no historical record. And then you throw in Carl Jung, who literally was just a psychologist. And before Carl Jung, even Blavatsky doesn't have alchemist on her resume. So you look at anybody prior to Carl Jung, almost none have that we hear about today have alchemist. You can find the alchemist, the actual cultist, but those books are going to cost you some money, and you are not going to find them on fucking Amazon. So, but after Jung, so what Jung did was he stumbled across some old alchemy books, and the symbology in those books matched some of his dreams and and so those dreams pertained to his idea on mass psychology, like the psychology of the general humanity. And so he developed psychological theories and then tagged on the word alchemy. And he never actually practiced alchemy. He looked at an alchemy book and was never actually an alchemist. Well, now everybody's an alchemist because they're all practicing Jungian alchemy, which is just psychology. Why just call it fucking psychology? And, that's all it is. And it's psychology that was somewhat influenced by old alchemy books. Now, once again, just like we talked about with Blavatsky, where she went and did her guru for a weekend fucking courses and all these different things and decided she's an expert without practicing any of them, Jung developed his psychology based on alchemy without practicing alchemy. So he never once went into a lab and practiced alchemy. So his understanding of alchemy from reading a couple of old books and never practicing it was far off. And now because of that, all the new age movement, because this has been pushed into the new age movement, they all think they're alchemists, and everybody's a fucking alchemist, and they all know how alchemy works, and they don't have any idea, and neither did Young. And so it's all just a huge disinformation push that's been forced on all of us. And from every angle. It was amazing with the Theosophical Society. They even had a division in the Catholic Church. Like they didn't care. And that's the brilliance to what they're doing, is they don't care what culture and what religion you are. They are ready to parallel it. They're like, oh yeah, that's just like this thing only. And then they steer you off, and then it all becomes their thing. It's very similar to like the pussy hat thing during the 2016 election, or yes, 16, yep. Where all these activists would be having a activism rally, and then they're like, oh, Hillary Clinton and AOC and them are showing up, and they're like, wow, these big stars are showing up, and like, yeah, they're all about what you're doing, like, wow. And then they get there, and then it's not really about what they were doing, it's about what AOC and Hillary Clinton and the Pussy Hat Brigade wanted to do. And so it's the same things happen with every culture, and they've sucked it all in. It's absolutely amazing. And I think that that inversion in the tarot is part of it. I think it changes it from a duality or from a trinity to a duality in the way that you look at it. Because what is it? The Justice card. The Justice card is basically, again, a weighing. That's when you're getting justice, you're weighing and measuring something that has happened, correct?
Yep. And
so they've moved that, and it was in a natural, it's been a long time since I studied this, but it was I think it was 8, 8, and 8. So which is actually a more heathen pagan understanding of things. Like there's the runes. The runes are 3 ets, 3 sets of 8. The constellations were actually not 12 constellations. This one gets me all the time when all these people argue about, oh, it was actually 13 because it was 12 and they've changed it to this. And 12 was always Roman. That was Gregorian. So are we arguing? We're like, oh, the evil Julian but the Gregorian, that was good. No, like put some study into it. Like heathens and pagans before that, actually, it was a division of 8. Everything's that 8 division. So when they switched it over to the 12 instead of the 8, 8, 8, and 8, now it's 12 and 12. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see exactly. I follow exactly what you're saying. I love it too. I'm just pulling up the Justice card in the Thoth deck so people can get a look at it as you're talking. But I like that because you see the 8 in a bunch of different places. I think even in Dune, because the Tleilaxu, I think 8 is their sacred number. So it makes a lot more sense, especially to have a trinity, because the duality, I think it supports the battery, the positive and negative, and it, whereas the 3 are a little more stable.
Well, even in the battery is a trinity, because the positive is, you got the positive cathode, the negative anode, and then the mercurial fluid, because the power can't flow without that mercurial fluid. Oh, and so that duality sets up a real, it doesn't work the way that they've got it. And it seems to me, and see, like, here's adjustment, and then you go into that's more of a weighing and measuring thing. And then 9, now you restart your cycle, and then there's another weigh measure set after the 9, and then you come to your 24 complete, or 16 or whatever, and then you come to your 24 completion. And they switch it to a 12 and 12 with the way they do it. And I know that there's, oh man. So one of my favorite episodes of Spiders, we had this guy named Will on. And Will is the gentleman who stole the missing block out of the Georgia Guidestones. So yeah, he's the dude. He went to jail for it and everything. Like, got caught with the stone and everything. So dude's totally legit. He's the dude that they're all of a sudden one day this corner piece was missing and there was like a little indentation altar thing inside there. He's the dude who figured out that that piece could be taken out and took it. Like, okay. So then later on in the story, somebody puts a block back in place. And that block, and you can find the YouTube video, gets taken down in front of everybody on the news. And this master mason takes that block and just dunk, knocks it into pieces and just obliterates it. And it's gone. It's toast. And everybody's like, wow, destroying evidence, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So Will has this other friend who also was kind of in on this whole stealing the block deal. And this other friend went and made a replacement block. Okay. Now, everybody has looked at all the numbers that were on the block, and they've all come up with like all these different, esoteric meanings and symbolism behind it. And their art's here. Can you ask him to feed the dogs or feed the animals? They've put in tons of research. These stories are magnificent. I mean, they make sense, and these two letters are because of this and this number, and it totally makes sense. Tons of research put in. Well, the guy who actually knows the story is like, oh no, they went and got married. Him and his wife got married at the Georgia Guidestones. The letters are all their initials, and the numbers is the date of the wedding. So, so there's some real extravagant stories attached onto some bullshit that, so that's kind of how I feel. Somebody just, one of the guys that's helping me out on the farm just came. So the dogs are, no, I was explaining it to them. I realize you know what's going on. So when they explain how Crowley, saw this as more important, they saw this and they all formulated it with that. To me, that's just kind of down that vein, again, for me, literally, Rider Waite was in the whole group with, Elias Levi, all them characters. And there's a specific inversions that they were putting in and trying to force on the world that I don't care for in any way, shape, or form. Like when you look even at the duality, with a duality, you've got just two forces that are against each other. And that's kind of a little bit true. So when you look alchemically, the sulfur side and the salt side are oppositionally against each other. But all that is a polarity. So those two things are actually one thing. And so when you're doing the alchemical marriage, you're not actually just melding the feminine side and the masculine side. What's actually happening in there is the masculine side is broke. And this is the same story as the story of creation, where you had the all splits into the all father and the all mother. And that's the duality. And the thing is there's no life there because the two things just balance each other out. And there's nothing, no action. So where life came in was when the all father split into two, and just like the all did, into a feminine and masculine of the all macroverse, because as above, so below, that micro, it matches the macro. So even though this is all the all father, now that the all father split, there's a feminine side of the all father and a masculine side of the all father. At this point, Gununga Gap pulls these two together. That's the great all mother. And we are not part of the all mother, but the all mother is what gives us life and death, because the destruction happens from Niflheim and Muspelheim smashing together. But in the Vesca Pisces of that destruction is where life happens. That's why she's the life giver and the destroyer. Okay. So those two sides, the Niflheim and the Muspelheim, were opposed, but it's an opposition of self. And so through the self, the All Mother brings the two sides of the masculine back together and heals it. And the same thing is happening in alchemy. The sulfur and the sulfur wants to rise and the salt wants to sink. And it's through the mercury that those two things come back together and the masculine is healed into one through the alchemical marriage with the feminine. And so the feminine is healing the masculine in this situation. So it's not really a duality, it's a trinity. And that's the way it always is. And that duality is a truncated understanding. I have rambled enough. You guys should talk some.
There's so much you said there that I want to comment on, but one thing I really just stuck out now is Mercury. You think about Mercury and Thoth, right? And Hermes and all this stuff. But when you, like you said, you do this work in the lab, so you understand how Mercury helps these two communicate. And then if you take as above, so below, we're in this physical form, so we could be like the lower part that's kind of going down. And then to understand and rise our consciousness, I guess you could say you use that Mercury, that understanding. But Sharon, what'd you have to say? I know you probably have something good.
I don't know. I was like, that's a lot of information for me. I still am very green to the whole alchemical process. So,
well, one thing I could say then is I'll bring it back to when you were talking about Jung. So I like how you said he didn't actually practice alchemy, so he had no true idea or understanding. And I'd like to say to people, it's kind of like if you read a book or you watch a video about making a garden or growing things and you think you have an idea, but then you actually do it. And then you're like, oh, that's what they meant. Right. So it's that same thing. So what do you think is missing then in his view? Can you point out anything like specifically you think that might be missing because of that, or the terminology, how it's used incorrectly because of that?
Yeah. So when you look, one of the more famous things is his color staging. So he's looking at and he's reading at what happens. Well, Nigredo, and he's matching these to a spiritual alchemy. And it doesn't, because part of the problem was the guy started reading metal alchemy instead of starting out with spagyrics. And so he's like jumps right into an advanced chemistry before starting beginner chemistry. Like it just, your understandings are not going to pan out, dude. So with his Nigredo, what you would match that up to really is the body portion of things. So when you're looking at your human experience, or a plant or an animal, what an alchemist is doing is getting down to the purity of you. Now, when you're doing that, there's basically three things that you're getting out of that system that are here because, like I said, your sulfur and your salt are oppositional. One wants to rise and one wants to sink. So the carbon body is locking those two things together, giving you the opportunity on this plane to bring those two things back together and marry them. But because again, these two things want to be apart. So through this experience then of this carbon body, we are supposed to get rid of it. And then through a force of our own will and understanding, make that marriage happen without the carbon body, which is what you see Gandalf do, where he goes through the fire and the water. This is the basic alchemical understanding. So Nigredo is the body portion of it, where I've taken and I've removed the oil out of the plant. And I've got this mass of garbage plant material. That was the body of this thing. And what I'm trying to do right now, as I'm doing it, is release the salt out of this plant mass. And because that's still stuck in there, I've pulled the oil out, but that salt's still stuck. And so what we're going to do is put that in a crucible, which is just basically a container that can take a whole lot of heat without off-gassing. which is why you use stainless steel or cast iron. Never aluminum. Aluminum off gases at very low temperature and pounds aluminum into your shit. Enjoy that when you're cooking. So you put the plant material in there and you start burning it. And just like when you're burning food, the first thing that happens is shit turns all black. And so this is the nigredo. This is the blackening. And what's happening is the carbon that was binding everything is coming forward, and that's presenting itself. And then it's getting released. So that's the next step now, is the carbon's getting is released out. So you're at like a white stage. Inside of the, now what you were really trying to do in this nigredo is get at those salt crystals. So inside of there, those salt crystals are going to go red and then yellow. And you can actually see that glow. And even when you pull the flame away, you can see that glow inside of the gray ash. Like the ash is like just this outer coating, because that was just the cellular material. So the three things the earth were providing for your body, a plant's body, an animal's body, is carbon, cellular material, and water. And then the things inside that cell, that little housing making the magic happen, is the oil and the salt. Well, we're giving the carbon, the cellular material, and the water back to the earth. So now we've, after the blackening, the white, the red, and the yellow, the salt has come together, because the masculine side, you put that under fire, it comes together. It gets hard. It's like, ugh. You put a man through some torture, they eat that shit up and come out the other side asking for more. Like, you cannot treat girls the same way. A woman scorned never returns. You burn some oil, it is never going to be good again. Like that's just how that works. That masculine side, you're putting it to fire, and now that it's been through the fire, it's fucking ready. And now we're going to put it in the water and strain it, because the salts are water soluble. And we're going to just strain that out, and that's going to leave behind the cellular material that we didn't want. So when we're looking at these color steps, we understand that the first steps of me becoming a more self-actualized, and I do like some of Jung's stuff. I'm not just fully shitting on him. I'm just shitting on the parts where he's an alchemist, because he's not. But where you're trying to self-actualize, the first thing you need to do is burn the world out. And so that's what you're doing with that, is giving back that carbon to the world, the thing that was the world's. Because what you want to do in your self-actualization process is find out truly who you are and what you want to do, not what the world wants you to do, not what you want. Because again, the ego is such a complicated subject, but it's mostly just your projection to the world. There's something that in some of these things you want the world to see you in a certain way. Well, maybe you're not that fucking way. Like, all these things have got to be kind of in alignment. The dark night of the soul, that's not alchemical at all. I would akin that to midlife crisis, where you have been living a certain life, a certain way, and inside of you, it's like, nah, you don't want to be like that. And you've not been listening to that. You've been doing another thing. And this all stems from us not understanding that, again, with that Trinity, we have three minds. We have our ancestral mind, our salt mind, and then we have our high mind, and then we have our ego. And so, or in our heart, that's the same thing, basically. That's stemming from the same area. And so sometimes our lower mind wants one thing, our higher mind wants one thing, and our ego wants an entire another thing. And we've all experienced situations in life where we've said we would do something, a certain way, but then when the situation comes up, that's not how we fucking react. And so there's a disparity here. And midlight in that dark night of the soul is basically where your entire life, the way you've been living it and the things you've been doing, are not matching some of your other minds. One of my favorite stories on really sinking that is when I was in prison, there was guys in there that would go on food strike in order to try and get concessions from the prison system. I want 2 meals a day, or double meals, or something like that, which really, that was probably the most common thing. And so they would quit eating. Well, food strike doesn't really get their attention, believe it or not, even though in modern society we think after like 3 days of not eating you're going to die or something. A human can go a long time. Yeah, like 30 days in prison. A guy's got to go 30 days without touching food before they even start worrying about you. Like, they're like, oh, we should check on that one. Like, it's a long time. Water, you can't go without water. You will become unhealthy real quick and start having system shut down. So these guys would go on water strike when they really wanted to, get some attention. And you would watch, and these guys, when they were in the prison, they make other inmates, when these guys are doing shit like that, sit outside their cell and watch them. Because then if they try to commit suicide, they call it suicide watch. And if they try to commit suicide, then you're supposed to run and tell the guards and whatnot. And so you got to sit here and watch these guys. And when they would break from their water strike, inside the cell, you got a bed, a mattress, a toilet, and on top of the toilet, there's a sink so you can brush your teeth, get drinks and whatnot. Well, these guys would stand up to take a pee, and they would see that water, and they would immediately stick their head in and just start drinking right out the fucking toilet. Now, there's a goddamn sink on top of this thing that has all the water you can want. Like, and if you ask them, well, I didn't want to drink water. Well, your body decided it was gonna. It overrode this mind. This mind said, no, I'm doing this. And then further, if you're going to drink water, are you going to drink water out of the toilet? Hell no, I'm not going to drink water out of the toilet. And here's dude sitting on his hands and knees gagging, water. I can't believe I'm doing that. Like, because that mind overrode the other mind. And so we have no understanding of having these 3 minds and these separate interacting personalities and desires. And it's real easy to become out of alignment with them. A lot of things in your high mind. If a job pays real well, you talk to guys. A friend of mine actually just asked me to send him crystals. And I was like, what's going on? He's like, I just need something to root me and mellow me out because this job's really fucking me up. And I was like, well, what you got going on? And he has some corporate job and he hates what he's doing, but he makes a lot of money. So it makes sense to have this job. It's a good job, but you're fucking miserable. He's not going to last at that. There ain't no crystal I can give you, bro, that's going to fucking make you help this, like, you are living horribly out of alignment with yourself. And I'm sorry that part of you thinks that the big money is the good thing, but your rest of you is going, no, it's not. And this is more akin to the dark night of the soul. Like I said, that's basically a midlife crisis. You realize I've just spent all of my good years doing something that I don't give a shit about. I don't want to do. I don't want nothing to do with. I'm just going to do something else. And the problem is because at that point you've already done that. You're a little crazy, so you just jump onto the next crazy thing instead of becoming healthy. Usually, you go out and as a guy, you go out and get a young girl with big tits that you bought in a fast car, and you think that's going to make life better, and it's not. It's not at all. You just made life much worse.
Yeah, I feel like you were talking to my soul there, Benjamin Balderson, because I went through that. exact process myself, but I didn't go out and get a woman because my issue was with women. So I had all the women I ever could, I guess, want. And I realized it wasn't enough. And, I'm lucky enough to have friends. I have friends in all different, I'm like Jesus, right? Like I have friends that are millionaires basically. And I would,
Capybara.
yeah, I'm a capybara. I'm friends with everybody. And I have friends that, they just, well, we would go to Vegas sometimes. I would go for these DJ conventions and some of them were DJs. They'd come out there and it was like, you're just living in a different world. And I said one time we were like at this club, on top of this outside getting the best bottles. And I'm like, I'm contributing nothing to this right now. It's great. And they're like, no, man, you're the funny one. But, so I got to see though that they're, in some sense they're happy, so I'm not judging them, but I could see how this material pursuit doesn't make you happy like you think it's gonna. And another thing is all this money you get, it's just a currency, and if it's obtained in this way where you don't feel comfortable, I feel like you're going to get rid of it in a way that you don't feel comfortable as well, or something like that. So
Easy come, easy go.
yeah, that happens a lot. Or when people hoard it and then they die with all this money, it's just these different things you hear. So yeah, but I love what you said about the Dark Night of the Soul. And I feel like as you were talking about the alchemy, it made sense to me too, because I had this part of the world in me, right? That this thing where I thought I would have to this problem I had was I didn't have enough women to sleep with and I had to just go around and,
Find them all.
just have a good time. And then I burned that away and I was just left with what I had. But like you said, there's so many traps to get you there. Then you go to one other thing. It might not be a woman with big tits, but it might be like a truther thing. And then you got to prove everybody wrong and tell them how this is the way for everybody. And, you're all being lied to. But like I got to a point now where I realized that I think that's how the realm's supposed to work. And the world is kind of there for a reason. It's a resistance. And then sometimes when it comes to encroach on you, you have to do what you have to do, obviously. But from a victim standpoint, I'm not a victim of it anymore. I'm like, oh, it's supposed to be that way. And then I see all this stuff where it's like Tiki Alum or whatever to fix the world. So you see all these movements like the New Age and all this stuff. And as soon as they're going to say that they want to fix the world, that's why I'm like, I start scratching my head, because I feel like that's what really makes these people and all these people we talk about, like, well, maybe not Alice Bailey, but maybe they thought they were doing the right thing. They're like, we're going to do this. We're going to save the world, everybody. We're going to show them how it's done, and I think that's how they resonate with everybody because they are speaking their truth, like Donald Trump, he probably really believes all these things, he probably thinks we're
like, are these crazy activists? 100%. They don't, they truly believe what they're saying. They truly believe it, no matter how batshit crazy and how much it doesn't work out. They believe it. Yeah. I say that all the time. Nobody goes home and is like, I'm evil.
Yeah, even Bill Gates.
Everybody wants.
He's probably like, I'm killing it right now. Literally.
Yeah.
Just kidding, YouTube.
I'm doing so much good for the world.
What were you going to say, Sharon? Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, it just reminds me of the quote we said today. The fool who persists in his folly will become wise. Just have to do it till you're done.
Yeah, 100%. I love the way you put that, though. It really makes me think of different things, and I'm happy about it. Thank you.
Well, really, your folly can be anything because you're not good at anything till 10,000 hours. Talks about that.
Yeah, I learned that with DJing, with wedding DJing, because I've been doing that for so long, and having this spiritual wake up or whatever I had, it just made it even better because it's funny. It made me better at poker. I used to play a lot of poker. I don't play as much anymore, but when I do, I'm better simply because I don't care what happens. I have the money. I'm already saying this money's already gone. I'm putting it out there. And if I win, I win. So when I take a bad beat, well, like if I'm in a tournament, I could just let it go. If I still have chips, I'm still alive. And that I've noticed that's the most because I used to get mad and then I would like find people at the table that I wanted to like get back at, Now I'm just like, whatever, man, I'm just telling jokes. So yeah, it's amazing how this stuff works.
That reminds me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to quickly tell an anecdote. That reminds me of like going bowling because I've gone bowling recently with Cody. And the first time we went bowling, I just like, I hadn't bowled in so long, and I honestly am not, I wouldn't consider myself a bowler. I don't know anything about it. So I was just throwing the ball the way I just felt like throwing the ball, get it down the lane and get some pins down, And I was doing pretty good. I even did some strikes, and I was doing good. But he started telling me like how to do it, and like positioning and how to walk and how to, move your arm and your leg and all this stuff. And I'm just like, now I'm just completely lost. Like now I'm discombobulated because now I'm thinking too much about how to do it. And it threw me off. I started screwing up gutter balls everywhere all the time. And I was concerned now, like I'm not doing it right, and I just had to like step back and go, that's just like, it's like, I don't know. It just doesn't make it fun anymore. Right. It's just like now it's like you're not going by intuition anymore. You're like trying to follow rules and worrying about what people think and worrying about if you're doing it right. It throws you off. I don't know. It just, what you said reminded me of that.
It's like Happy Gilmore. Remember the Adam Sandler movie Happy Gilmore, where he's like this great golf player, but he goes outside the rules, right? It's the same kind of thing. And Happy is his name. He's just having a good time,
That's funny. Yeah.
And this goes right back to what at the intro when Brandon and Sharon were talking about right and left hand and religion, where that can be the gateway to spirituality. And for me, all right hand and left hand is and a lot of people want to go good and evil with that. Well, there's already good and evil. We have that term. Like your right hand and your left hand aren't, good or evil. They're both pretty good. Right hand path people require, and this totally goes into the Dune talk that Brandon and I had. Right hand path people require structure, and that's okay. Some people, if you put them somewhere and tell them just do, they don't know where to start. They don't know where to go. And they need a road. They need a map. And some people, you drop them off in the middle of a forest and you come back and they've got a mansion and they've got roads and a field over here and they've domesticated some animals. Like they got no problem figuring it out and doing their own damn thing. This is a left-hand path person. And so and it's super interesting, the interplay between those two things, because obviously some people need that structure, that leadership. But then also after that leadership, it does not take long for the person not experiencing, because then on the right-hand path, that person's not really experiencing the spiritual experience. And so does not take long for that to get twisted and turned, just like we talked about with Jung and Alchemy and everything else. And in the Dune series, the prophet gets to actually experience that during his own lifetime, where typically, from our experience on Earth, it takes hundreds of years for us to fuck up something somebody said. Like, he's got people actively fucking it up around him while he's standing there. He's like, and he gets super butthurt about it, and he's like, my entire empire, because if you have a spiritual awakening and you explain it, and the very first person that agrees with you, that person's right hand path, so you can't really shit on them. Like, like that's just the person that agreed with you. But then from there, again, he goes, you've all turned this into meaningless ritual, and it's nonsense. And then he ends up becoming the blind prophet who's against his own empire, and he's screaming shit like Muad'Dib's words are water on the sand. Like, you fuckers didn't hear nothing I said. Like, you just totally fucked it up. And so it doesn't, that's the traps of the right-hand path, because you're not having the spiritual experience. But on the left-hand path, you can have people that just go completely batshit with it. like the originators of the Theosophical Society, which I was speaking about. Those guys would have been left-hand path for sure. Nice.
Yeah, 100%. And what I was going to say, it kind of reminds me of something I heard, like the middle way. You know, sometimes it's okay to have a little structure, and then you go out on your own and you figure it out. And yeah, exactly. And that kind of brings me to what I wanted to talk about, which was another thing was how some people in either religion or the New Age movement can actually be, you know, you can learn from them, but it doesn't mean that you have to worship them. And one of these figures that I learned a lot from was Ram Dass. And it was mostly because of the Bhagavad Gita. I was really interested in that. And then he had a thing that went along with it. It was like a lecture series he did at one time at Naropa, which is like, you know, checking all the New Age UN boxes. But if you actually listen to his message, he'll tell you not to cling anywhere. And he even has this saying that I like where he says every method is a trap. So it reminds me of this when you're going from left to right and staying in the middle. You have a method, which would be more right hand. You use it to get where you need to go, and then you just let it go. You know, like meditation was for me, for example. Meditation helped me immensely, you know. And then I just one day was like, I don't feel like meditating anymore. So I didn't because I wasn't married to it. When I first started doing it and having a lot of success, I would try to evangelize for it and get people to do it. But once I realized, you know, I have more point of view that I do now. Now, if somebody's asking me, I'll kind of recommend it, but I always give them that little caveat. Like, you know, it's not doesn't solve everything, because sometimes you could just find yourself sitting in your house meditating instead of doing what you have to do. So, and that's what I was doing.
And it's very interesting that, like you said, there's different forms. My favorite form of meditation actually is going out and doing menial labor. And that's how I do it best. If I've got some things I need to work through, like I don't do it at this house. My last house, my favorite one, our house, the field it's like somebody planted rocks and then planted more rocks and then dumped some rocks on top of that. And so I would go out and literally just with it's called a spud bar, and just rip rocks out of the ground and go pile them up. And that obviously requires no thought, zero thought. You don't got to think about that at all.
Like, washing dishes.
So, I was going to say washing dishes, Sharon.
Dishes.
That's why my woman loves me. She doesn't understand why I like to do dishes. I'm like, because it's me time, man. I love it.
Meditation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your body gets activated into something, and now your mind so it's take this other part of you can work out what it needs to work out. It's free, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, swimming is like that. I used to like paddleboarding a lot. It was the same kind of thing. I'd paddleboard out to this island because I lived on Long Island Sound here in lovely Connecticut. So yeah, it's all that same. That's what I would tell people. But for me, it was the sitting down that worked, because I really needed to just chill the fuck out, you know, and like relax. I was just like so. Yeah, I mean, you guys, I'm telling you, if you saw how I was before in the past, it was crazy. It was totally different. And it's funny now. It's great, though, because I could work through it, because I still feel it coming through sometimes, especially now that I'm in a relationship. And this is something we could also talk about as in regards to, like, you know, self-healing or whatever you want to call it. And I even hate calling it that. But well, we'll just call it raising your consciousness, right? So I've noticed that as I'm interacting with my woman for these past months, that I get these tendencies that come up and I want to express myself in a certain way. But then I start to look at that behavior and say, oh, this is just something that I'm kind of either projecting into the situation or whatever. So it's been really amazing. It's kind of supercharged my healing. I'm starting to see a lot of my blind spots, because I'm like, why would I react like that? That doesn't make sense, you know? Like, it's really amazing. Yeah. And she's really the same way, which I like, because she can understand that language. So it's amazing. But yeah, go ahead. I want to say that because I know she's going to be watching this. Love you, honey.
No, I love where you went with that. And I actually really enjoyed where you were going before. I don't know that I felt probably similar, I guess. No, I think I probably did feel similar, because I also went through, I call it my slutty phase, where I was just absolutely whoring around, and at the end of that, I went through hermit time for years. Like I had, and
Me
I
too.
was miserable during, and I understand that it was happy and fun, and that's the weird thing about happiness. Like that's just a duality feeling. And so when we strive to be happy, that's not really something you should be striving for. Happiness is really what we should be striving for is contentedness.
Exactly.
Um, you know, uh, there's a lot of things that make us happy, like, eating candy. Like, yeah, I love a piece of candy. That doesn't make it good for me. So,
I heard heroin is excellent, by the way. It gets really good
yeah,
reviews.
right, right, exactly. And people don't realize how they've fallen into that trap of that. Um, and I thought I was having a good time, uh, and I really wasn't. And even now, I don't beat myself up too much for it anymore. But there for a long time, I realized how despicable I was. Like even when I was, because I wasn't like I didn't try fooling anybody thinking that we were going to be in a relationship or anything like that. But you know what? These, like a lot of these girls, they say that, and they're getting, oh yeah, I don't want one either. No, they do. They do. And sometimes they don't, but a lot of them do. And when you're just out there doing that around, you're hurting a lot of people and hurting yourself. Uh, it made sex completely meaningless. And then I had to go through a hermit phase for quite a while and realize a lot of things about myself and the relationships that I had been in prior to that. I had a bunch of recurring problems. And it's like, why do I keep dating these crazy bitches? Why does this same thing keep happening? Well, it's because of me.
You
I
are the
was the
common
fucking
denominator
problem.
in all of your
Yes,
failed
I was the
relationships.
common denominator. Like, yeah, that it wasn't a magical thing. Like it was me. And I was to stop having that happen, then I had to fix me. And so I spent a few years alone, and then I was honestly had no interest in a relationship, and I really had that first 6 months you're pretty miserable, but after a couple of years into it, I was like, fuck yeah, this is the best. Like, I love my life all the time. I'm doing stuff I want. And I mean, I was still productive. I still got things done, but all the time I was doing things I wanted to do. No, I remember when I was in the bad relationships, like there was times like my wife or my girlfriend or whatever at the time would come home, and you're like, you feel like going and hiding in another fucking room, or you're hiding what you're doing. It's like, why am I living like this? I'm an adult. What the hell? And so, which doesn't mean that I didn't make a bunch of changes in between me and Christy getting together, or after Christy and I got together and got married. Not in the way that I would have made before that, where you're like, you're just making concessions to people or whatever, but like in more genuine ways. Like I start noticing, like, if you guys would have met me 5 years ago, like Brandon was saying, I was an angry fucker. I'd already been through the slutty phase and all that, and I'd been through a lot of things, and I was just pissed. I hated the world, and then I did not know how to interact well with people, and I would hurt Christy's feelings, and I genuinely cared about Christy, and she genuinely cared about me, and things I would say would make her cry, and that didn't make me happy. Did not make me happy at all. Like, and it did not make her happy. And if I wanted her to be around, then I was going to have to quit acting like that. That's fact. And it just made the way I interacted with because I was good inside myself, but I was very raw and very hard on the world. I had to learn how to interact again with other people. And so now my changes, it's like I see a reflection of me in her, like, and I understand myself better through her. And so that's kind of where I think that Brandon's coming from right now. And it's just a beautiful place.
Yeah, it really is. It's amazing. And it's also amazing. Shout out to the women who could see us diamonds in the rough, and realize the potential. because that belief gives you the belief, and now you have the confidence, and it's like it's just built, and then you go upward spiral instead of continually spiraling downward, which again, like we said in the beginning, is fine, and that's why I feel like I was the fool, and I still am the fool. But you have to be the fool and persist in your foolishness to become wise.
Well, the fool's the first card and the last card.
Yeah.
It's a circle.
Yeah, remind me the quote we used. It might have been last week, where you'll know your place, you'll know your journey's complete when you come home and you don't recognize it, something like that. Or you look at it with new eyes. Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, like Gandalf the White. I was called that once.
Yeah.
That's funny. It reminds me of when I'm here in Jersey for an extended period of time, like a couple of weeks, and I get back home. The first time I did that, and I was here for 2 weeks, and I got back home, I was like, is this where I live? Is my house? It was so bizarre.
Oh. Amazing.
Yeah.
I think he's probably staying out of the house while he sees me on a show.
Something else I was going to bring up, but I felt like you were just talking to my soul right now. I feel like I need to like write some things down. No, yeah, it's amazing how a lot of these journeys are parallel. They can be because of this, and we always think it's us or society or this or that, when it's just you have to kind of do the work. And sometimes, I went like 4 years through a major hermit phase. Really, Sharon knows. Sometimes I go like super hermit on the
B goes super hermit.
But I feel like that's my calling, and I used to give myself a hard time about it. But now I'm like, you know what? These people, they get to enjoy me when I'm around. They better enjoy it, But yeah,
I understand. I regularly, again, I live out in a little hole in the mountains. Like my hermit phase, I literally was the guy out in the middle of the mountains that, my closest neighbors were quite a ways away, and I did not like them. Hey, still don't like those people, but
maybe we should talk about a little bit, because we're about an hour and a half in. It's 2, 3, 4 here. Maybe we should talk a little bit about. We'll switch gears and talk about like radium and helium and all that stuff, because this is something that I've been watching. This guy, shout out to Ben from The Archivist. He goes through, and it's in the beginning, it might be a little hard for somebody to listen to. He's a little dry, but once he gets into the articles and then his take on them and stuff is really, really amazing. Basically, he just reads all these articles from the 1800s, and he goes state by state. He started in Alaska, and they were finding like Greek pottery and like megalithic things. And my favorite is, I think it was the governor of Colorado in one article was saying how all these ruins are being destroyed. The Smithsonian's coming in and taking all this stuff, all these mummies, and there's nothing we could do about it. There's no laws against it, and then you don't hear anything about it. And they talk heavily about radium also, so that's why I wanted to talk about that.
And radium's super interesting, and it's a good one. Like I came in before the show, I was over talking Brandon. I was over too excited. I just sit back for a second and chill out.
No. Well, see, we this is what we tell our guests. This is the Over Sharon show. We like when you overshare, because our core audience already knows our message. We rail about it enough, so we like to get someone else in. Well, we'll be railing about it soon, though. We're going to do a solo episode, guys, so don't worry. But yeah, we always like to get as much as we can out of our guests, so it's fine. Yeah, you're good.
You bet. Well, I came in, and I had actually been sitting here waiting for the show, and then I was watching Karen BFE's channel. And Plateauberfest
in Vegas,
Plateauberfest,
right?
Vegas. Yeah, Vegas, guys. It's going to be a blast. But they were talking about helium. And obviously helium being a hot subject in the conspiracy world with the theories of NASA taking up all the helium and whatnot. And helium is a super, super weird element. Radium, I do enjoy talking about also. Radium fits in a lot of times with the galvanic cell that that Lucas L.C. King that I was talking about earlier. He had come to me with, and then him and I have been worked on for a number of years. And then I've been working on it by myself too for a number of years. And that includes what we would call nuclear power. Well, and a lot of people think that that's super complicated, and it's really not. It's understanding that um, you've got protons, electrons, and neutrons. When a thing that determines what it is as an element is the number of protons that it has. So hydrogen's one proton, and everything else above that. So that's actually where the hydrogen is God theory comes from, because hydrogen's one, and so helium is two hydrogens. So that's two, and then so on and so forth. So everything's built off of that. So there's an entire theory that hydrogen itself is God. Real interesting, right? Well,
I've
when you get
heard the concept that God is water too. I've heard that.
Yeah. So they're all wrong, but they're interesting theories.
God is the all.
Yeah, God is the all. It's everything. That's the all.
Absolutely.
And we all have different things in between that we align ourselves with. But that's one thing I really appreciate as a heathen is like Odin. Nobody thinks Odin's the all. While I may follow Odin's the all father, that's because he walked a certain path and did certain things. Odin gave everything for knowledge and wisdom, and that was a walk that he took and things that he did. And so I have a great appreciation for that. Odin had a father. Before Odin had a grandfather. Before that, there was Ymir and Adumbla. Before that was Muspelheim and Niflheim. And before that was the All Father and All Mother. And before that was the All. So nobody thinks Odin is the All. This is where I think some of these religious wars stem from, is they start thinking that this thing that they're aligning with is the all, and it never is. It's always some fractal of the all. Yes, I know. Sorry. Shitheads all the time. What the hell were we talking about before that?
The all.
Yes.
Your cat is the all. See, there's a
yes. She's like, you talk too much. I am the all.
I can add in really quickly. I like how you view everything, the all, as God, because then you have a certain reverence and respect for every single thing that you come in contact with, like even a rock,
Yep.
Certain degree.
Absolutely.
Unless they're in your yard.
Absolutely. And like I said, I can understand, where they're coming from. Like, a lot of, I'm fully against the any story where mankind comes out of one is derived from one source.
Oh.
Like the out of Africa is nonsense. That's based off of Anaclypsis, and it was something the UN pushed. So basically where I was going with the elements. So you start looking then, and some of these upper elements can't hold themselves together, and you start looking at element stability. And so like uranium has got a bunch of protons that it's just wanting to leak off, because that is not a stable element. And so that's leaking off positive energy. And that's what we call radiation then. And that will keep leaking off those protons until it reaches stability. So in its path, then it will turn into radium. It'll turn into radon. It'll drop all the way down. It starts reaching stability right around bismuth, is right around where it starts reaching stability. And then in that chain, you can even look at the other side of it where you have lead, and lead will soak in those protons, that positive energy, that radiation, and start moving up the other direction. And so you start understanding that then all this is movement of protons. Now, with radium could be mixed with thorium. And so thorium's weird because rather than moving protons, thorium moves neutrons. And so the more neutrons then it can hold, it has, the more protons it can hold. So you put in thorium, now you can kind of smash that uranium, and you can, this is where you're getting your uranium enriching. And you can start transferring things just like with the lead, where you can start actually pounding ions into it. And that radiation is just that release of those ions. So radium was a nice mid-level one that wasn't dumping off so many ions, because when it's at the uranium level, it's really fucking unstable and it's just dumping them. And that was real nice to work with. You ended up seeing it get used a lot in World War II. That was one of the big causes of the cancer and the baby boomer and the older movement. They used to have women take, and those old clocks that had the little glowing tips on the ends, that was radium. And they'd have women, that was one of their jobs, when the men are away at war, so the women got to go get the work done. And so they'd have them doing stuff like that and painting radium. So these women are just taking this radium, just dumping protons.
Uranium or radium?
Radium.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. You bet.
Yeah, because much of it could be bad for you. Like, it's not a...
Oh, 100%. But then also, so then that also breaks down into how is your system. Like when you look at like George Weissman, when you go flying on a plane, you pick up a whole shit ton of radiation, and you will actually have radiation sickness when you get back. But if you use the AquaCure, so you have enough hydrogen in your system, the hydrogen is the mercury. Water is the mercury of your system. And psychos. The water is the mercury of your system. So the reason that you get sick from too much ion is you're just not balanced. So you need to have two things in order to deal with that. You need to have enough mercury to let that energy pass, and then you need to ground. And you need to have enough ground. And then you can handle a vast amount more of the radiation, the upper end of things. So George Weissman's even actually had medical tests. And when he uses the AquaCure right before he flies, then he doesn't get the radiation from flying. The radiation just does not show up in the blood. It passed right through him. So he doesn't end up getting that radiation sickness from it. So that's really just super interesting. It's kind of amazing how so many of these things, we understand them, but we only understand them in certain conditions, and we don't realize that there's just so many fucking variables to everything. Like even something stupid is, we all know water freezes, it boils at a certain temperature, it freezes at a certain temperature. Well, that all depends, and that's all fine and dandy, and except for it doesn't really work, because all that depends on your atmospheric pressure, all that kind of thing. Like I can boil water at room temperature. If I pull enough atmospheric pressure off of it, it'll just start boiling right off. And there's no heat involved whatsoever. When you use a hydrogen torch burns at less flame. The flame has less temperature than a Bic lighter. Seal into freaking liquid. Wow. And that doesn't make any sense at all. because there's a specific temperature that it does it. And then that same flame, you can put it on your hand and it doesn't do anything. So we start understanding that we don't have a lot of understanding. Like, and a good portion of that is because people just aren't out doing things anymore. You look at the most famous minds in our community where we're talking about Tesla or Schauberger or Wilhelm Reich. You start reading Schauberger's work. How did Schauberger start figuring out water? He just sat there and watched a fucking river. That's all he did. Just sat there and watched. And then through his observations started making, theories, and then started, hypothesis, and then tested it, said the hypothesis. And through that, you had greater understandings and such. But this all starts from just observation, and then observation while you're doing stuff. And we're told not to do that anymore. Trust the science. Trust some other dude.
Yeah, get a job, Shell. Or why are you just staring at the river? It's funny because you said that.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I came across this, but a few years ago, I came across something that said after you fly, you should walk around barefoot for a while. And I mean, I'm sure the water cure would be way better, but it always made me feel better. That's the first thing I would do is try to find, like some grass and just walk around for a little bit. And I always seem to have better results.
And you want to do both.
Yeah.
The mercury makes that energy transfer able to happen, but you still want to transfer it and get it, what you're doing, into the ground.
I like that.
When you say do both what? Ground and?
Do the hydrogen and then going out and grounding it.
Oh.
Because that's where you start gathering these understandings. Being an electrician, or electronics even, you start gaining so many understandings and understanding that our body is that all it is electricity. Every signal that you have is electrical. And so the same concepts all apply. And when you're in that plane, you're grabbing a bunch of positive energy. You need the mercury to make the transition possible so you don't end up just getting it locked up. And then you need to ground it out and get it out of you. Let it pass through. Like fear, right?
Yeah, exactly like fear. Let it pass through me, over and through me. Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't hold it. It's not yours.
Awesome.
Totally awesome. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Sharon, about?
No, I think that I got my questions answered.
Okay, good. Because I have a question for you, Ben. This is going to switch subjects too, also, but we see this government system, and we all really don't want to be a part of it as much as we can not be a part of it. But as far as marriage, do you have any suggestions for people that might want to be getting married but don't want to get the government involved?
That's a great question. And I wanted to, because it reminds me of the question I first initially had for you when we first had you on, and I forgot to ask you, which is, I know you married Jim Maiden, right? And Rachel, or you did some sort of a pagan or heathen ceremony for them. So I kind of wanted an idea for how that worked. And I guess what some of those older rituals were that didn't involve paperwork and documentation, like that sort of documentation,
You bet.
I love
and I do. I did marry Jim and Rachel. Jim's the host of Weaving Spiders, and I had the honor and privilege to be able to be the one that married them. They wanted to do more pagan heathen type wedding ceremony. So when you're doing that, we went up. They chose the night of the lunar eclipse. The and that was awesome. So just as the lunar eclipse was starting, we performed the ceremony during the eclipse and then finished watching the eclipse. They did it at the Stonehenge recreation just off of the gorge there in Washington. Full size recreation. So we went. So you're at Stonehenge during a lunar eclipse, basically the equivalent, and then to do this ceremony, it was one of the craziest and most amazing things I've ever been part of. So you're doing you walk around a circle as a heathen, then a pagan. That's we you go around the circle 3 times, and you're going to find that 3 is because you're representing each level. So you're always going to find things in that 3, and you walk around the circle 3 times, and that's basically setting the stage. And with them, they wrote their own promises, but it's called knot tying or a hand fasting. So it's the old tying the knot. And what you do is then with each one of these promises made to each other, you add another wrap to this knot. So they have their hands put together in an almost handshake type thing. And you wrap the rope around their wrist. And then at the end of the ceremony, after they've made these promises, they pull their hands apart, and this comes out and it pulls together into this infinity loop. That's like this perfect closed system of infinity that you two have now become one, and your promises are tying them in the middle, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Wow.
And I have full respect for it, and I fully consider that just as valid as paperwork marriage. Now, with that said, because we do live in a government in this system, and the government has so much overriding power, I also understand people that choose to go the other route.
Absolutely.
Now, Christy and I, we performed our own ceremony. We wrote our own ceremony. I performed the majority of it, and it was a heathen ceremony. But we also had paid to have Josh, was then my apprentice, is now my partner. We paid to have him made into a priest for a day. In California, they let you do that. You can do a priest for a day thing. And so then basically all he's doing is signing the marriage certificate, because our government is overwhelming. So let's say my wife got hospitalized. Well, without that piece of paper, she's not my wife, according to them. Not saying that that's true at all. You, even without God's, just the fact that you have committed yourself to that should be enough. That's the way it was supposed to be. You said it, that's enough. But say Christy has a medical problem, and they're going to do something to her that her and I are not cool with, and I need to say, hey, no, you're not doing that. She was not cool with that. If I'm not her husband, nobody gives a shit, if I don't sign that piece of paper. For myself and Christy, we were both married and had kids before her and I got married, and I owned my property. I owned my animals. I owned, everything that I had. Christy moved into that. Well, without that piece of paper, she's my live-in girlfriend, according to the government. And so if I die, and let me tell you what, I definitely come close a lot. I am kind of a dangerous fucker, and and I'm not scared of anything. So I get in some hairy situations, and I work in a lab, and like my one partner just blew himself up just recently because these things are extremely volatile and explosive, and that shit happens. Well, if I died, I've got 7 kids and 7 grandkids. One of my kids decides, you know what? I don't give a shit about Christy. I want my inheritance. Now my land gets sold and everything else, because my live-in girlfriend has no rights to my land. according to their system. So one of my kids decides it's gone. It's gone. Now what I lived for, my wife, what I was building this for, she's out of my shit, and she's done because I got, and out of 7 kids, if you think that one of your kids isn't going to be an asshole, you're nuts. That's just life. So Christine, so thinking on that, and I had, right before her and I got married, I think I had almost killed myself on a backhoe. The backhoe had it had an extend-a-hoe on it, and going down a mountain, the extend-a-hoe outweighed the front of it, and the front end of the backhoe came up, and all of a sudden I was shooting down a mountain with no steering on a backhoe on a highway with traffic zipping around me, down a mountain. Not good. And then, days later, Christy's off picking my grandkids up because my daughter is having some problems and we need to take my grandsons for a while. And she's off getting my grandsons and I'm not even there, and she's doing everything a wife's supposed to do. And why wouldn't I give her the protections of, if something does happen to me, that she still has what she needs, because she is my wife and this is hers, and her and I are building it together. So I understand going both ways.
I completely concur. I get it too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that.
Yeah, love it.
We originally weren't going to do that. We were going to go to we were actually thinking about taking a vacation to like Iceland or Norway or Germany maybe, and just getting married over there and just doing a pagan ceremony over there. But again, I thought about it. If I die and my kids take everything, where does that leave my wife? And, it's bullshit, but it's the system we live in.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I was going to say, that's another thing I was going to ask you, basically, is you can do a ceremony yourself, because that's kind of what I was feeling. But then if you want to include the government angle, you could have a friend do it for you or whatever. But I like that idea of just kind of doing it by yourself.
Yeah, all Joshy did was witness it and sign the paper. Yep, they're married.
He had to ask us if we both agreed.
Yeah, he had to ask us if we both agreed. That was the entire thing. You agree you're married? Yeah, you agree you're married? Okay, yep. And that was his whole part of it. So
gotta hear it out loud. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess
we could. So
oh, go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say we could start to wind down, but finish your thought if you have one.
Yeah. So I honestly did not find it. When you look at it from that point, really all they were doing is, all the government kind of did was oversee that we both agree to this. Oh, you both agree? Okay, contract signed. And I understand that contract, to me, my word's as heavy as a contract, but
that's not the energy you're putting into it. You're putting into a good energy, and you understand, you comprehend what's going on. So I completely get it.
Exactly. And at some point in time, and the entire truth community needs to realize this, is when you start living what you're talking about, some of the things that get talked about are not feasible. And you only find that out through living it. This is how the thing with Jung, and again, the thing with Blavatsky, all them, the problem stemmed from them not living what they were talking about.
Theoretical.
Yeah, they got theoretical instead of real with it. And there's some of these things, like even something like solar power. I do like solar power. But I also, a lot of people get mad at me because I will talk about the drawbacks. Like, people get this idea that you go spend a few $1,000 on a system and you can live like you did in the city. When I first moved off grid, because I can see what I'm using hourly, we thought we were living really frugally, and we did compared to most people. And we were using 2.4 kilowatts an hour. Well, that means that I had a $17,000 battery bank, 24 L16 batteries, and at 2.4 kilowatts without sun, I would burn through those in about 12 hours. So that's about 12 hours of power, costs $17,000. And then every time you do that, you're beating those batteries up every time you cycle them in and out. So you can't live like that. That's not feasible. And then what happens when you go 2 days without sun? What about 5? Like, so you have to make giant adjustments. And where we landed is about 0.2 kilowatts an hour. And most people don't realize like that includes this computer when I'm using it, a couple of tiny 60-watt light and a couple of 60-watt bulbs. That's about all I use for electricity. We don't have any other devices like that. And then when you want to use something that has more power, like you want to charge up my batteries for my DeWalt flashlights, you got to do that during the day when the sun's out at the peak hours. But you still can't take away too much because you need to bank away some of that power for overnight and blah, blah, blah. So like when you start seeing memes go around how, oh, live off grid, have no bills, live just like you were before. It's great. Like, oh, you ain't never lived out here, have you, motherfucker?
Yeah, it sounds great, but then you put it into application and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, and you find out you're doing as much work on your farm as you were in a city job. So in no way do you ever get out of the work. The work is going to happen. I mean, I find it much more fulfilling and gratifying because the work's for me. It's at my own pace. It's what I want to do and how I want to do it. But that whole just, plug in, everything's easy like it is in the city. Fuck no, that don't happen. Not at all.
How do you get internet?
We got so you guys know Steve Poikonen, Slow News Day?
No, it sounds kind of familiar.
He's like he does alternative news. He's not really a Republican or a Democrat. He's just kind of laying out what the hell's going on, and which basically equals into he shits on everybody because it's all hot garbage. Yeah,
he's like an encyclopedia of political.
Yeah, he's an encyclopedia of political, but he talks about what they actually are doing, not the political talking points. Like, yeah, they're saying this, but you know what? They signed this bill. Like, they did this with this person. So he came and stayed with me for a while, and he does like 10 shows a week. So he ordered Skynet, whatever, satellite internet. And honestly, they told him that they had just gotten a Sataloon. They didn't say Sataloon, but had just gotten a Sataloon in place a month ago when he had ordered it. And that was right when I started my show. So 2 years ago, I think, maybe a year and a half, close to 2 years, basically is when I started. We got a available internet in our area, and it actually works pretty good. I'm pretty impressed with it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I love how they say that. Oh, wait, the satellite doesn't cover my area of the fucking world. What do you mean? Like, oh yeah, we got to put a.
We're on a mountain. We should be close.
No questions.
Yeah,
here.
And then when you're on a mountain, I'm on a mountain. I'm close. I should get better signal than everybody else.
Oh man, that's hilarious. So, well, I guess we could talk about where people can find you and maybe what you're going to be up to in the coming.
Yeah. I've been on a break on my show, but my show is just Benjamin's Balderson on YouTube, or my prime show is on Rockfin. So you get the first hour on YouTube. The things that that YouTube will X us for, I usually save for the second hour, and then the second hour Rockfin's pretty open. They let you say just about anything. So if it's a little hot for YouTube, the second hour is always on Rockfin. Not every episode is like that. There's some episodes that it's just 2 hours, but Benjamin Balderson on YouTube, Rockfin. I'm on most podcast apps. Most exciting thing I got coming up here is Flattoberfest. It's going to be in Vegas at Sam's Town Casino. Big lineup this year. There's Amanda Vollmer's going to be there. We're getting in Dave Murphy. He's a guy from the UK. Mark Devlin. Everybody's heard of Mark Devlin. He's coming over from the UK. Amanda Volmer's coming down from Canada. Jaron Campanella from Jaronism's coming. And then me. Yeah, I'm speaking too. So, and
awesome.
all the spiders are going to come. So we're also having like a separate spider get together thing. So it's just going to be an epic weekend. Yeah.
So
There's like
give
20,
me some
at least
spider
20
names.
people. Well, I know Chris from King of Cups is going to be there. I believe Gordy Two Shoes is going to be there.
Nice.
Rachel and Jim are coming. I think Alan Marcus said he was going to come. Said Mario Garza and Michelle from Symbolic Studies. They were talking. Yeah, no, it's going to be great. Well, I mean, Vegas is super cheap to get to. And yes, Vegas is a shitty, it's Vegas. But you know what? It's super cheap to get to. Rooms are super cheap. These things are set up for this. Yeah. It's at the Sam's Town Casino. If you want, you can stay in the casino the whole time. They got bowling alleys, like 50 restaurants, you name it. Or you can go out and dick around in Vegas. The last time Christy and I were in Vegas, we went to Hoover Dam because we're not really into the casino thing. Hoover Dam's super tour. Cool. Yep. Hey, I did the dam tour.
We're gonna get some.
Guy looked at me like I was crazy. What's that?
I said, where can I get some damn bait from Vegas?
Yeah. There's one in outside of Estes Park. They've got all kinds of things, like it all says "damn," best damn, and it's pretty hilarious.
You go to the Grand Canyon while you're there too. I think it's like a 3 or 4 hour drive from there, right? Or 2-3
hours. Yeah, not very far. It
goes by quick out there.
Not very far.
I love the desert.
Yep, exactly.
Maybe
and then
while you're there.
Yeah.
Maybe
and then
maybe you'll see a sandworm while you're there in the desert.
Oh.
Yeah. I'll eat some spice,
Yeah.
Become the take the golden path. I don't know. Golden path sounds rough. I'm not sure.
So what weekend is that? Is it going to be late October again?
Yeah, October 20th and 21st. There's the 21st, 22nd. That weekend. And so there'll be people there beforehand. I'll probably be there about 3-4 days beforehand. Christy wants to go see the Grand Canyon.
Nice.
So, and then during the thing,
the skywalk. Do the skywalk. If you've never done it, it costs whatever, but it's so worth it. You know what I'm talking about?
No, it sounds crazy. Is it a bridge across the Grand Canyon?
It goes out in an arc and it's all glass bottom, so you can just see under you. It's freaky. People get freaked out by it, but I loved it.
Ooh.
Oh, you just almost passed out hearing it, huh?
Yeah, that sounds scary as shit. Like I stayed in the Fauché building. It was for 40 years. It was the tallest building in Minneapolis, and it's the old type skyscraper, so it's the needle type ones. And I didn't stay on the top floor, but I stayed on the next to the top floor. It was, I did the whole 5-star thing. That was crazy. But you could feel that fucking building moving. Like you could feel it swaying in the wind. You're like, holy shit. Like, that is scary.
Yep, I've been at the top of the Empire State Building on a windy day. It was crazy.
Oof. Yeah, you feel that shift, and I have not figured out how to fly or levitate or any of those things.
Well,
and what's most disturbing for me about that when you fall like that, because you and I are pretty much the exact same age, so I know that you just, our entire generation was fucking put through torture with Faces of Death. And I know you've seen one.
Yeah.
When you fall from that kind of distance, you bounce. That's fucked up to me. I don't know why that part bothers me the most, but that you bounce, and I mean, you bounce like 10 feet back up in the air. Like,
oh my.
Yeah, that bothers me. I don't know why.
That was like a joke we used to say in the Marines. It's like, it's not the fall, it's the bounce that gets you. It's that second fall.
Yeah. Scary as hell. Yeah, an entire generation.
It's not quite splat.
Yeah.
No, splat. I think I can handle splat. The bounce, that fucks me up.
He's stuck on the bounce.
Oh god.
I don't want to do that.
We got to consult Carl Jung. What would he say? Yeah, it's great. And when you get your show back up and running, if you ever need a guest, man, let me know, because I'm sure we could talk.
100%.
Ever. That'd be great.
I love both you guys.
Yeah, for shizzle. So
about
for us, though, if you're watching, you want to get more of us, go to more.
Oh, yeah. My wife says that I'm supposed to make you read Wheel of Time, and then you've got to come on my show and read Wheel of Time.
Yeah. I'm getting that from a bunch of different angles, so maybe I'll get into that.
Do it. Yeah. I honestly think it's better than the Dune series, to be honest. I mean, it's different things, but oh my God, it's so epic. But yeah, the show, I will get the show up and running again here shortly. I've just been so overwhelmed. And then Brian got hurt, and then I got hurt, and it was just too much. And then too many babies. I just got overwhelmed, and I had to take time off, and I'm just now getting caught up where we got the house in order, where now my dogs, because the dogs got in heat, and that's why there's someone that was fighting, because fucking heat, so I had to rearrange and rebuild the house, and in order to do that proper, I had to put in new flooring, because our flooring was fucked up, because whoever built this cabin originally, they put in particle board for the floor, and it's very humid around here, and it just soaked in that humidity, and so it was like a sponge, and the whole floor would kind of sink when you'd walk. So I had to rip out the subfloor and then put in new bracing. You see the big ass beam I put in right there, because that whole thing was bowed. That whole center beam was bowed. Okay. I mean, it was bowed like 5 inches. I think that moved at least 5 inches. Would you say?
Wow. Did you jack it up?
Jacking that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I got a 20 ton bottle jack, and pulled out the floorboard and went clear down to the ground and jacked that shit up. And got about 5-6 inches out of it. And then I put a big 4x6 in there and replaced the subfloor. And then we put up that railing that you could see, and with a tall gate. So that's all solid redwood. So the dogs now have separate areas, and I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Good stuff. Do you guys have basements out there?
No, it's earthquake country.
Oh, all right.
Like our house is on stilts.
Oh, wow.
More sturdy in an earthquake.
No, that has never quite made sense to me either. What the exact mentality behind that is, having your house on stilts as opposed to on something solid during an earthquake. I don't really get it.
They want you to dance around.
That's what they do. But I do understand that because our angle is so steep, the land at the front, at our house, at the back end of our house, it's like 2 inches off the ground, and at the front end of the house, it's like 3 feet. So I do get that. That's a pretty you kind of got to stilt that up a little bit. I would rather have cement pads, and maybe 3 levels of cement pads or something a little better. I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Groundwater is so high here.
And there's the other question. The groundwater is so freaking high here. We couldn't I'd love to put in a root cellar, and then you dig down with a fence post digger to, before, by the time you get down to the bottom of the fence post, it's filling in with water. You're like,
oh, wow.
You don't
have to worry about lack of water.
No, that is the huge, if you're moving off grid, and this is one of the things that I laugh at preppers about, these preppers that they sell shit to, and they're like, yeah, I've got a whole bedroom full of water. Because I live off of water tanks, during the summer, I know how much I go through. And with a small garden, I was going through 2,500 gallons of water a week. Wow. Like, I don't know how you got that packed up into your bedroom, but you know, that's a lot of Dasani bottles, you know.
You better be peeing.
And so, yeah. Huh?
Said you better be peeing on your plants to recycle that water.
You damn straight, getting yourself a still suit and shit.
Yeah, exactly.
You damn straight. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. If you don't have if you aren't, and the same thing applies for food. Like, people don't understand. You think you have 2 years of food storage. We're gluttons in America, for starts. You know, most of you probably eat through that food in like 3 weeks, and you get real tired of eating that kind of food. If you don't have your own food that you're growing in your own water, you know, or in animals that are producing food, and don't have your own water, even those guys are like, yeah, I'm going to go hunt for all my food. You know, when the system goes down, that most people are going to go do that, and the animals are not going to be cool with it. And number one, it's going to thin them out so bad you're not going to hardly find anything, and they're going to get smart. You know, just like back home, pheasant season, the day before pheasant season, you can't hardly get rid of pheasants. You're damn near kicking the damn things out of the way. And then all of a sudden, the morning of pheasant season, you can't find a pheasant. You're like, those things just ghosted. they know.
Exactly. Nature's a lot smarter than we give it credit for.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to be out hunting down deer every other day or something like that. You know, most people that live off of more meat like that, they talk about trapping rabbits and mice and things like that. And you're going to have to get a long ways away from the city before that becomes a tenable situation, because all those rodents, rodent population, while it might be annoying, is nothing compared to what it was when I was a kid. Nothing compared. Like, I used to run around catching buckets of 5-gallon buckets of snakes, and rabbits were just everywhere. You couldn't hardly kick a damn rock without hitting a rabbit. Wow. You know, and that's just gone. We poisoned the hell out of everything.
Yeah. I've been seeing a lot of rabbits around here recently. Maybe it's a good sign for me.
I get rabbits in my backyard.
The universe trying to tell me something. I don't know. But anyway, if you want more of the Over Sharon show, go to morelawsmoreproblems.com. Click on that Over Sharon tab, and you will find us all on the different podcast catchers, and also here on YouTube, the Brandon Bonanza channel. Check out my show, Brandon Bonanza. Check out the show we did about Dune about almost 2 weeks ago now. It was amazing. That Spider Week we did was really good. So check all that stuff out. And also, yeah, shout out to the chat, because when we premiere these, we have a chat going. So every Thursday night, we've been playing with the time a little bit. So this one's probably going to be a little earlier, because I have this tarot class I got invited to by somebody from Chance Garton's audience. So shout out to them. He was on our show. He played that. And then somebody reached out to me from Connecticut and was like, hey, we do this tarot meetup where we just hang out and talk about tarot. You want to come? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So, yeah. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us all this whole time. And what do we say to the good people, Sharon?
That once you start Over Sharon,
then you totally stop being a Karen.
That's right. So share on.
Share on, everybody. We'll see you next week. Later.